Okay, so here, no coefficients in front, so we drop the parentheses. No coefficient there is just invisible 1, so we just drop the parentheses. Whenever you get rid of parentheses, the first thing you want to do is combine like terms. -4 plus 8. 8's bigger than 4, so the answer is positive. 8 minus 4 is 4. The i's, they're both positive, so it's going to be positive. 8 plus 4 is 12. I. There's the answer. 4 plus 12i. All right, the next one. 7 minus 4i plus 6 minus 5i. Same steps. No coefficients, so we just drop the first parenthesis. Nothing in front of the second one, so this plus gets distributed. So it's positive 6, negative 5. Combine like terms. Positive 7, positive 6, they're both positive. 7 plus 6 is 13. Negative 4i, negative 5i, they're both negative, so the answer is negative. 4 plus 5 is 9i. Number 7, we have negative 7 minus I plus negative 5 minus I. Again, repeat the process. We can't do anything. Order of operations always exists. You can't do anything inside the parentheses. We can't distribute anything, so drop the first one. Now the second one was positive times negative is a negative 5. Positive times negative is a negative I. Combine like terms. Negative 7, negative 5, they're both negative, so the answer is negative. 7 plus 5 is 12. Negative I minus I, they're both negative. So we add them. I plus I is 2i. This is very important. With variables, with letters, whenever you add or subtract variable letters, you only change the number in front of them. Whenever you multiply or divide variables, then you change the exponent. So that's very important. When you add or subtract, you change the coefficient, number in front. When you multiply or divide, you change exponents. And we'll get to a section where we'll go through all the rules of exponential equations. Okay, let's look at number 8. This is 8. 5 plus radical negative 36 plus parenthesis 4 plus radical negative 4. Close parenthesis. Okay. Nothing in front, so we just drop the first parenthesis. and nothing in front of the second one, so we drop those. A negative radical negative 36. The negative goes out in front as an I. The negative goes out in the second one as an I. Square root of 36 is 6. So 6 times 6 is 36. Square root of 4 is 2. Combine like terms. 5 plus 4 is 9. Positive 6, positive 2, they're both positive. 6 plus 2 is 8. I. Basically, what's saying is I have 6 I's over here and I add 2 more I's, so I get a total of 8 I's. Eight minus 5I minus negative 9 plus I. And we can't do anything inside the parentheses. There's nothing in front, so we just drop the first parenthesis. Now, in front of here, there's a negative 1. So negative times negative is a positive. 1 times 9 is 9. A negative times a positive is a negative. 1 times I is I. Yeah, the signs, you have to make sure you follow the signs. Combine like terms. 8 plus 9, they're both positive. Answer is positive, is 17. Negative 5I minus 1I, they're both negative. 5 plus 1 is 6I. Number 10. Now we get the multiplication. Radical negative 9, radical negative 36. Okay, do inside the parentheses. There's a negative inside that one, so it comes out as an I. Likewise in the second one, it comes out as an I. Square root of 9 is 3. I. Square root of 36 is 6. I. Now we multiply. 3 times 6 is 18. I times I. Remember, when you multiply, you change the exponents. I squared. Remember, anytime you see an I squared, that equals what? It equals negative 1. So this is 18 times negative 1 equals negative 18. There's the answer. So I'm going to take everything step by step by step. Number 11. Negative 2I times negative 3 plus 5I. Can't do anything inside the parentheses, so we have to get rid of the parentheses. Distribute. Negative times negative is a positive. 2 times 3 is 6. I. Negative times positive is a negative. 2 times 5 is 10. I times I is I squared. And I squared equals -1. So I change that I squared to -1. 6i negative times negative is a positive. 10 times 1 is 10. So the answer is 10 plus 6i. Always put the real number first, the imaginary number afterwards. Because remember, the standard form of imaginary numbers or complex numbers is that. And number 12. -9 plus 8i, 3 minus 2i. We're going to start using this method a lot in the next chapter, the FOIL method. FOIL methods only work when you have binomial to binomial. The FOIL method is an acronym. It stands for first, the first numbers of each parenthesis multiplied together. So negative times positive is a negative. 9 times 3 is 27. The O stands for outer. These are the outer ones. Negative times negative is a positive. 9 times 2 is 18. And I stands for inner. These are the two inner ones. Positive times positive is a positive. The next line down. 8 times 3 is 24. I. The L stands for last, the last numbers. Positive times negative is a negative. 8 times 2 is 16. I times I is I squared. Combine like terms. We have -27, positive and positive. So 24 plus 18 is 42. 8 plus 4 is 12. Carry the 1, 2, 3, 4. But we also see an I squared here, which I squared, remember, is -1. -27 plus 42i. Negative times negative is a positive. 16 times 1 is 16. Combine like terms. 27, 16. 27 is negative and 16 is positive. 27 is bigger, so the answer is going to be negative. 27 minus 16 is -11. Plus what we have left. There's that answer. What do y'all think? So far, so good? Where'd you get stuck earlier? Or in the next section?
Yeah, I went to the next section.
Okay.
It looked like there was more.
No, let's see. Okay, so that's the end of section 1. Chapter 3, section 1. Here we went through section 2 also. So we have 7t plus 5, 2t minus 6 equals 0. Remember earlier this semester I said that there were two types of things we could be asked. We could either be asked to solve or simplify. Simplify if you don't have an equal sign. Solve if you do have an equal sign. So here's an equal sign, so we have to solve it. This is an important concept. Whenever you have binomials multiplied to each other, it has to equal 0. Remember, this is called the zero product principle. Because if you have two numbers that multiply together and equal 0, the only way that's true is if the first one is equal to 0, the second one equals 0, or they're both equal to 0. That's the zero product principle. Whenever you have two numbers multiplied together, either the first, the second, or both are zeros. Since we don't know which one's which, what we have to do is take each of these equations separately and set them equal to 0.
So that t didn't mean anything special.
It's just a variable. It's X.
Sure.
No.
One thing that I wasn't sure.
Yeah, so I hate t's because eventually if I write too many of them, my hand gets tired. They look like pluses. So that's what a lot of times I change it to X and Y, and at the end, before I enter the final answer, then I put it back to t. So now we solve for the variables. Subtract 5 from both sides in the first one. 7t equals -5. 7 times t, get rid of the 7, we divide. T is equal to -5/7. That's the first answer. Second one. Add 6 to both sides. Get t by itself. Divide. Why do we divide by 2 on the second one? Why do we divide?
The two,
Why don't we subtract 2?
because of multiplication, we have
Right, it's the opposite. This is multiplied. Very good. Because 2 and t are multiplied together, we have to divide to get rid of something. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Those are my two answers. It's the answer for the first one and for the second one.
So would those just have be comma separated?
Yeah, when you put it in, it'd be -5/7, 3. Because they're not locations, they're values, they're specific numbers. Because in other words, if I took this and put it inside here and worked it out, the answer would be 0, because these are my zeros. Remember earlier also, when we talk about zeros, we're looking for solutions. They're the same thing. When I ask you to solve something, like they did here, I'm looking for the zeros. The zeros are the same numbers as the X-intercepts. Yeah, so whenever we start using these words, they're interchangeable. Zeros and solutions are actual just numbers. The X-intercept is a location. And so let's look at the second question. Am I going to solve or simplify this one? Yeah, there's an equal sign, so we're solving. Okay. We're going to go through this example, then I'm going to go through the explanation of why this is so. Because remember, this square term, this is the leading term. The exponent is called the degree. It tells us the number of solutions possible. And it also tells us the shape, whether both ends go the same direction or opposite directions, how many bumps we're going to have. So looking for the first terms, what times what gives us W squared? W times W. So each parenthesis has to have its own W. So that's the first thing. So look at the first term. The second step, here are the steps. First step, look at the first terms. Look at the second sign. Here's a second sign. If it's positive, both signs are the same. They are the first sign. I'm sorry, right? It's so small. So it says, look, the second step, look at the second sign. If it's positive, that means both signs are the same. It's whatever the first sign is. If it's negative, then we have opposite signs. If the second sign is negative, that means we have opposite signs. That means one's going to be a positive, one's going to be a negative. The bigger number gets the first sign. Okay, so we got W from W squared. The second sign's a minus, so we know they're opposite. One's a positive, one's a negative. When we get the numbers, whatever's bigger, we'll go after the negative sign. So now we figure out what times what is 28. What times what's 28? When you subtract them, because it's a minus sign, we get 3. What times what equals 28? No, the two numbers we're looking for is 4 times 7. That equals 28. When we subtract them, we get 3. That's how we check these two numbers. Why do we know it's subtraction? Is because there's a negative sign right there. If it was a plus, then we'd add them.
We say that in English just to add it to the steps.
Actually, yeah, again, it'll get too large for us to right here. I'll go ahead and type it up and send it to y'all.
Or just say it and then I'll write it.
I just did. In the third step, it's how do you put what times what equals the last number. We can't say that because combine means put them together. But with what times what gives you the last number, And depending on what the second sign is, if it's a minus, you subtract them to get the middle number. If it's positive, you add them to get the middle number. See, I mean, it's way too complex to even try to put it in words. So the third step is try to find two numbers that equal 28, that when you subtract them, you get 3. And we got 7 and 4. Since the first sign is negative, the bigger number goes there. Remember I said here, if the second sign is negative, the signs are opposite, the bigger number gets the first sign. The first sign is negative, so the bigger of these two numbers gets that sign. This is third step is find the numbers. Fourth step, set both equal to 0 and solve. W plus 4 equals 0, W minus 7 equals 0. We take both these parentheses, set them equal to 0, and solve. Those are my two answers. So W equals -4, 7. Those are my zeros. If we were to graph this, we know the graph crosses at those two locations. That's what that tells us. It tells us a lot more than just two numbers.
Vertex, if it was a quadratic.
Well, is it a quadratic? It's a 2,
Oh, yeah, you're right.
so it is a quadratic. Quadratics only have two answers. At most, two answers. And yeah, so whenever you have a square, we get two parentheses. That's how we know it's quadratic. Only two parts.
It was graphed out to be a parabola, though. if
Yes.
we took it further. But
Yes.
that's probably on a later problem.
Well, yeah, we're going to discuss it here further. Question 3. 4x squared minus 44 equals 0. Here's a first set of special equations. Special functions. This one's called the difference of two squares. The difference of two squares. What it says is this. If I have two numbers and they're both squares, perfect squares, and they're subtracted, I can factor them by using both of those, whatever's under the squared, and having different signs. Okay, so look at the first one. Is 4 a perfect square? 4 is made up of 2 times 2, so it's 2 squared. Is 44 a perfect square? (44) is made up of 4 times 11. 4 is 2 times 2. So it's not a perfect square in itself. Okay, that's the first thing you want to check. But since the second was not a perfect square, we can't use this. We'll use that very soon enough, though. So since we can't use this difference of two squares, the first thing you want to look at is, can you factor anything out? Since we only have two terms, now we can split them up. And only one is variable. We can split them up. So we have 4x squared equals 44. Divide both sides by 4. Four goes into 4 once. 4 goes into 4 once. Remember, this is a quadratic equation. How do we know it's quadratic? What's the degree? Yeah, it's 2, which means we're supposed to have 2 answers. We're solving for x. To get rid of the square, we have to take the square root of both sides. So those cancel, so we have x. But whenever you take the square root of something that's squared, the answer can be positive or negative. Those are our 2 answers. Whenever you take a square root of a squared term, place a plus minus in front of the answer. Now, the biggest question is why? So this is where we get our 2 answers. X can equal square root of 11, or x can equal negative square root of 11. Those are our 2 answers. Now let's show you why. If I said x squared equals 4, what can I put inside there to make it a true statement? I could say x equals 2. 2 squared equals 4. I can also say negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. So we have our 2 answers. So whenever you square root a squared term, the answer is a plus or minus. So this is the problem I was having. It just had these square gold boxes annoyingly everywhere. It's like a virus was put in there. Okay, use the graph, it's coming up, to find the x-intercepts, the zeros of the functions. Okay. Okay, so there's the graph. Let me change it for people in the viewing audience. Use the graph to find the x-intercepts and the zeros. So what are the x-intercepts? Remember, but they're different in the way you write them. X-intercepts are locations. So the first x-intercept is at open parenthesis, -2, 0, comma, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 0. So x-intercepts are locations. The zeros of the function are at -2 and 5. -2, 5. Okay. So what's this one going to look like? What are my x-intercepts? -3, 0, open parenthesis, 5, 0, close parenthesis. And the zeros? -3, 5. Yeah, so that's the difference between the two. Okay. Now, this equation is number 6. X squared equals 10x plus 10. Complete the square. Here are the steps for completing the square. First step, make sure that the equation is set equal to 0. So the leading term always has to be positive, so leave that one there. Move everything else to the other side. X squared, I subtract 10x from both sides. And I subtract 10 from both sides. Make it equal 0. You do this because you make sure that it is a quadratic equation and it's all structured. Okay, first real step. Move the constant term to the other side. You have x's on one side and non-x's on the other. Yeah, even though we just moved it over, it's always a safe mechanism just to make sure you have the right numbers. So you have the x's on one side, non-x's on the other. Okay, remember, a quadratic equation has this form. This is important because you have to know where A, B, and C are. The third step is add B over 2 squared to both sides. What's our B in this example? 10. Don't worry about the sign because when you square it, it'll become positive. So just worry about the number. Okay, now. On the left side, only do inside the parentheses. Don't square it. On the right side, work it all the way out. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25. It was 35. All right, so the right side's finished. On the left side now, the fifth step. Take, this is what's under the squared. Take what's under the squared. Take under the squares and the first sign. Put it inside the parentheses and square it. So take whatever's under the square and the first sign. At this stage, at this step, you can tell me the vertex. The vertex, remember, is HK. In this format, it's the opposite of both of these. Since they're opposite sides of the equations, our vertex is at 5, -35. Just take the if it's in this form. But we're not stopping here. We're going to solve it. So if you're at this stage right here, you can just the opposite of what's inside the parentheses and opposite of the answer, and that's your vertex. But we're going to solve it. remember, let's try to solve for x. Square root both sides, because we want to get rid of the square. So we have x minus 5 squared, the square root. Remember, you have to put a plus or minus in front of the answer. Don't forget that. So the square and the square root cancel out. So I have just x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 35. And so I'll get x by itself. Add 5 to both sides. Those are our two answers. Our first answer is 5 plus square root of 35. Our second answer is 5 minus the square root of 35. Any questions about that? So, but I think we have another one coming up, and we'll do a lot more of these examples in the very near future.
It's like steps, but I guess after you do a few, it starts to stick.
Well, it's always the same steps. Yeah, you're right. It's okay. Now this next one says we have 2x squared minus 13x equals 1. And this one simply says solve it using the quadratic formula. Remember, a quadratic equation has this form. So the quadratic formula x equals, well, whenever you use the quadratic formula, what you're solving for is the middle term. What if that was z, you'd be solving for z. If it was x cubed, you'd be solving for x cubed. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All it is plug and play, but your equation has to be equal to 0 first. So in our equation, set equal to 0. Label A, B, C. So A is in front of x squared, that's 2. B is in front of x, negative 13. C is the constant, negative 1. So we have negative b. B is negative 13. Plus or minus the square root of b, which is negative 13 squared, minus 4 times 2 times negative 1 over 2a. Negative and negative makes it a positive 13. Negative 13 squared, negative 13 is positive 169. Negative 4 times positive 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 1 is positive 8. 2 times 2 is 4. Again, you can do it. Negative times negative is a positive. 4 times 2 times 1 is 8. 13 plus or minus 169 plus 8 is 177. We're going to have two answers. 13 plus 177 over 4. 13 minus radical 177 over 4. Remember, okay, can we simplify 177? Does that factor out into anything? 7, 14. No, it's a prime number. So you would type your answer either this way or with a comma with both of those. If the question asks you how many real solutions we're going to have, how many answers, whatever's inside the radical, b squared minus 4ac, number of real solutions. Not the number of it, but the sign. If it's greater than 0, we'll have two real solutions. In other words, we'll have a graph that looks like this. If it's equal to 0, we're only going to have one real solution. It'll look like this. And if it's less than 0, we're going to have no real solutions. The graph will look something like this. Make sense? So if you want to see how many answers you're supposed to have at the end, just do the b squared minus 4ac. If it's positive, you're supposed to have two answers. If it's negative, you won't have any. And if it's 0, you only have one. You want to know what else this equation tells us? Remember yesterday we talked about our last class, we talked about the formula finding the vertex? To find the vertex, our formula was negative b over 2a, and whatever that answer is, we put it back into the equation. And there's a quadratic equation. And nobody asked why this is our equation finding the vertex. Look at the middle example. It only has one solution. What's that location called of that one solution where it touches the graph one time? That's the vertex. That's the lowest point. The lowest point touches it. It happens when the inside the radical is 0. So if inside the radical equals 0, what are we left with? So that's where the equation came from to find the vertex. It came from the quadratic equation. Okay, in this one, it says f of x, this is number 8. F of x equals 6 minus 9x. Is this function linear or quadratic? Are there any exponents? No exponents? It's linear. Yeah, it's quadratic or linear. This one's quadratic because there's an x squared. If our largest exponent was x cubed, what would we call it? It's called a cubic. Okay, that does it for section 2. Okay, in this one, find the vertex, the axis of symmetry, and the maximum or minimum value of the function. There, that's all you really need is just looking at that.
Give us as the function.
They didn't give us function. They just give us the equation, a general equation.
We'll set f of x equal
The x minus a h squared plus k. Because it didn't define it. It just gave you the general equation of this in vertex form. You gave f of x equals a x minus h squared plus k. That's pretty much what they gave you. But all you for this one, vertex maximum, you only need 1 point. The vertex. The vertex is where? At the lowest point, at 4, -2. What's the axis of symmetry? It's the x value of the vertex.
flew right past me. I just missed it all.
Yeah, but you were too worried about the equation. I'll only put up there what's necessary. Vertex is the lowest point or highest point.
Did you plug in 3 into it or what?
Why would I plug in 3?
What's
This
the thing at the top?
that says section 3. That's the title. All you do is here is he's giving you this graph. So what's the vertex?
Okay, so we're given
Yeah, yes. Okay, so I'm not going to put it up there because you get too confused by what's. I will put down everything the equation says that's needed.
trying to make sure that I can look at my notes and see.
Yeah. It didn't have a function. It just had a general equation for vertex form. So the axis of symmetry is the x value of the vertex. Maximum minimum. Is this the highest or lowest point? So it's minimum. This is if it's high. This is if it's low. Now we're given an equation. Okay, here we're going to find the vertex, the axis of symmetry, maximum, min. The rest of that stuff is just words. This is the meat of what the question is asking. I gave you a function asking you these 3 things. How do you find the vertex? Our A is 1, B is -6, C is 5. Label those first. So it's negative, B is -6, 2 times 1, negative and negative, positive. So what have we just found there at 3? What does that define for us? The x value of the vertex is the axis of symmetry. Now we have to take our 3, plug it back into our original equation. To look for the y value. 3 squared is 9. 6 times 3 is 18. Nine minus 18. 18 is bigger than 9, so it's negative. 18 minus 9 is 9. 9 is bigger than 5, it's negative. 9 minus 5 is 4. That's the y value. That gives us our vertex. Make sense? Or did I lose you still?
It was so fast, all I could do was copy it. It helps make sense.
Oh, don't worry about copying it. I mean, you have access to all this stuff. Just follow along, because if you're trying to write, if you're trying to write everything I'm writing, then it would be way too long.
If I don't write it, then later I'll just not forget.
No, I could email this stuff to you. I can email these notes to you. And this video, I figured out how to save it to the computer. And when class is over, I gotta spend half an hour and uploading it. I can email it to everybody. Or, okay, well, then where did I lose you? Where did I lose you first then?
I was copying the equation, and then you were already like way down.
Was this stuff we did yesterday, last class?
Well, I didn't get that far in homework. So
That was okay.
it's okay.
Perhaps we're pretty much out of time.
It's okay.
No, let's go. Let's walk this and we'll stop here then for this. You have the function. It's asking you to find the vertex. The formula of the vertex is negative b over 2a. F of negative b over 2a. This is the x and that's the y value. We have to label a, b, and c first because all it is plugging stuff in there. So negative b. B is negative 6, so it's negative of a negative 6 over 2 times a is 1. Negative is positive. 2 times 1 is 2. 6 over 2 is 3. That's the x value of our vertex. Whatever we get there, we plug it back into our original equation, into that, which is what I did here. 3 squared is 9. 6 times 3 is 18, plus 5. 9 minus 18 is negative 9. Negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. That's our vertex.
It's not that I couldn't understand it, it's just that I didn't have time to think it.
Right.
Look at it, it makes sense. So I get what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I apologize if we're going too fast, but I mean, this stuff that we've talked about last time also, that's why I asked at the beginning of class, are there any questions? And that's, you don't know what you don't know yet.
I told you straight out that I didn't do 3.2. So all questions might
After that is moot. Okay, now do we have a maximum or minimum? Look at A. If A is positive, it looks like this. We have a min. If A is negative, it goes down. We have a max. Okay, so since our A is positive, that means we have a minimum at that point, at the vertex. A minimum at 3, negative 4. Yeah, I remember we had this problem because the computer wouldn't let me go to the next questions. Yeah, and that really sucked. But now it's working.
That was always a classic problem when I was doing all this math in the past. Keep up with the teacher.
Yeah. I mean, just throw something at me if I go too fast.
They're just writing it out on the board and then it gets erased.
Oh yeah.
There's no.
Which is why I started, whenever I use this, I can scan these notes and send them whoever wants them. That's not a problem whatsoever. We're doing the same thing here. We're looking for the vertex, axis of symmetry, and maximum min. Remember, label A, B, and C first. Looking at this, are we going to have a maximum or minimum? Yep, we're going to have a minimum because A is positive. So the graph will look like this. So the vertex, negative B over 2A. The X value, negative B over 2A. Negative 10, 2 times 2. Negative 10 over 4 simplifies to 5 over 2. Now we've finished question B. Question axis symmetry is negative 5 over 2. X equals negative 5 over 2. Now we got to find the vertex. Squared 10 negative 5 over 2 plus 14. So negative 5 squared is 25. 2 squared is 4. Now we can cancel. The 4 and the 2 cancel, leaving 2 on the bottom. The 2 and the 10 cancel, leaving 5. Positive times negative is negative. 5 times 5 is 25. Let's go ahead and combine these two. Negative 25 plus 14. 25 is bigger, so it's negative. 25 minus 14 is 11 over 1. The LCD is what? 2. So we have to multiply the bottom by 2 and the top by 2. 22 over 2. Just work the top now. Once you get a common denominator, the rest is straightforward. 25 minus 22 is 3. And there's the vertex. So we have the vertex, axis symmetry, and the minimum, since it opens up. You see how interconnected all this stuff really is? The vertex leads axis symmetry, and vertex tells us the maximum or minimum. But let's stop here. We'll pick it up from this here next time, because my car's now been overparked for 10 minutes. They probably can give me a ticket already. So we'll pick up from here next time, and we'll do sections 4 and 5 and finish chapter 3 on Monday. Yeah, because we have 4 more questions here. Ooh, how about this one? Which graph is it going to be?
That's the A of
A is in front. A is the 1/2. If A is positive, it opens up.
If it's negative,
It opens down. So it can't be A and C, since this is 1/2 is positive. So now we look at where's the vertex. The vertex is at -5, +2. -5, positive. So the answer is B. You see how I got that? So look at the A. Since A is positive, it has to open up. The vertex is this number and this number, the opposite of this number and that number.
so when A is between 1 and
That means if it's between, it opens up wide. It still opens up or down. That's all we care about for this, is whether it opens up or down. It opens up, so that means it can't be one of these two guys. The vertex is the opposite of the inside parentheses and that. So the answer,
based on the transformation section.
exactly. That's all based on the transformation.
Yes, by the way, but I figured it would come up later enough. It wasn't in the exam though. I was looking for it.
True or false? This equation is going to have a minimum value.
So I have to think,
What direction is it opening?
if A is greater than 2, then it's
No, if A is greater than 0,
greater than 0.
it's positive, so it opens up. So true. It's going to have a minimum value. The graph of this can be translated the x squared to the left 4 units. True or false? Is it moving left or right? It's going right. It's always opposite direction was inside there. So the answer is +4. It's moving to the right. Again, this is all from the transformation. Okay, we'll start with this one next time, the last one and this one, because this one, we're going to tear it all up, and that's going to help us in the next section. All right. Sorry about going so fast, everybody, but yeah, I don't want to get a $75 ticket. Oh, guys, miserable.
I got when it was 20, but I had to go to the library or whatever that building is,
Yeah.
pay it.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. If you need any help, just holler, and I can do Zoom anytime y'all want to. All right. Have a good one.